What keeps you up at night? I know what keeps me up at night. And before I tell you what keeps me up at night, think about it. What keeps an entrepreneur up? What are they thinking about? Is it a product? Is it a service? Is it a flawed product? Well, for me, it's something that was invented in 1866, and it hasn't changed since. And it's so widely used, and it infuriates me. And I don't know how to say this with a straight face, but I'm going to try. It's the men's wall urinal. Little chuckle. Women don't understand this. Let me tell you why. The wall urinal, let's just go for the purpose of what it is, and people walking up. The first man walks up, does what he has to do. Inevitably, sorry to say this nicely, there's a little bit of dribble. Next person walks up, doesn't want to stand in it, stands a few inches further back. Same thing happens. Go to Dodger Stadium and see how this works out. In a few minutes, you have a puddle. Now, you don't have to be a germaphobe to know that this is so flawed. And everywhere you look, just like what Mike said, there is opportunity everywhere. You know, I'm going to read this. The Google definition of an entrepreneur is a person who organizes and operates a business or businesses taking on greater than normal financial risks in order to do so. I don't know about you, but that doesn't fit in my wheelhouse. I'm going to give you a little bit of history here from the way I see it. The word entrepreneur really came to fruition or matured back in the 80s, 1987 to be exact. There was a brash real estate maverick who wrote a book, and he marketed himself as exactly that. And the book was called The Art of the Deal. And we don't have to mention his name. We don't even have to think of where he is now. But when you think about anyone who lived in that time in 1987, he was the poster boy for an entrepreneur. He was. For me, it went back a couple years earlier. I went to USC, and one of my fraternity buddies, he was a business major, and he had an idea. And his idea was to create a wall calendar with pictures of girls that went to USC. It was so successful, he marketed it to it was called the Valley Girls calendar, because think of it, 1987. But he marketed it to every college and university in the country. And to me, that was entrepreneurial. The next year, my roommates and I wanted to make money to go on a ski trip, and we had hats made for the UCLA SC game. And we sold those, and actually all of us made close to $1,000, and that was an entrepreneurial experience. But I'm gonna buzz through a little personal history, and then we'll get to the meat of what we're talking about here. My first recollection of anything entrepreneurial happened probably when I was 9 or 10. I grew up in Tarzana, and my mom would drive up and down Ventura Boulevard, and she would always, she would be disgusted by the weeds coming out of the ground in the sidewalk. And about that time, I was looking to make extra money. And she said, why don't you ride your bike down, talk to the managers of local businesses, get them to hire you once a year, once a week, and you'd come down there and clean up I did that. That was the first entrepreneurial experience. Second one wasn't quite as flashy. It was record albums, think back then. And I figured out a way that I could go to Warehouse Records, buy records, take them home, copy them on a cassette, and take them back to get different records. And I kept that cycle going. And a lot can be said about how improper that was, but when I think about it now, it was really a young person's way of figuring out how to get something done. There was a problem and a solution. And the solution may not have been the greatest one in the world, but in my world, an entrepreneur is really a mindset. It's how you think. And I can tell you there's not a day that goes by that I don't drive by an empty retail store and go, what would be good there? What would work there? How would it market? And then you got to peel the onion and peel the layers and see, okay, who are the people that would go there? What are the neighboring businesses? What's the rent? And so it really starts with an idea, as Mike said, but then it goes to cracking the code. And that's what you mentioned, which is really the branding. Branding is really, for a consumer product, is really creating a product that has empathy for the consumer. I've learned a couple things, and one of them is nothing happens it couldn't have happened without what preceded it. And just like I said, buzzing through some of my story here, my first job out of college was with a PR firm, Joe Molina Public Relations. And he had a client that was named Harold Cleworth. And this guy painted photorealistic paintings. So realistic that you could see, and he did cars, exotic cars. So you could see in a Ferrari that he painted, in the paint, you could see the reflection of the house next door. And he was trying to promote this guy, and he got very high prices for his paintings. And he figured out something, and it was called the Porsche Crush. Think about it. This guy paints exotic cars. The media event took place at a junkyard, and there was a huge attendance. And they took a Porsche Carrera and they crushed it into a rectangular cube to make it a dining room table. And you say, okay, it worked. It worked. It propelled Harold Cleworth through the roof. And I learned there's a bravado. There's a bravado in marketing that has to happen. You have to dare to be bold. Next job was Previews Magazine, which was on the west side of LA, Santa Monica, where I sold ad space. And for me, that was a collision of ads, graphics, editorial, and sales. And those things coming together were very helpful for what happened later. And then there was Arbitron Ratings. If you don't know what Arbitron is, it's the Nielsen's for radio. And I was in charge of going around to the radio stations in the 13 western states and teaching radio stations how to use this complexity of numbers to sell their ad space. So again, you had a lot of different factors that played in there. And there was the most impactful job I had was you're going to laugh at this. It was a tiny little ad firm called Ad Dog. One-man show. I was the two-man. And what he did was he marketed to people who, again, was hot back then, was 800 numbers. Toll-free numbers for horoscopes, for adult conversation, for things like that. And the one thing that I got, and why I say it was so impactful, is here's a guy who figured out how to make his tiny little ad firm, a one-person show, it was now a two-person show, look like a conglomerate. It was the modeling he did. It was the words he used. It was the way he described it. And it added the credibility that others needed to use him. It was a one-man show. And it was a rinky-dink show, to be honest with you. But there was so much there. So here's where it gets good. In junior high, I had a friend, and his dad was in the egg business, and I made fun of him relentlessly. And after college, I got very into triathlon. I was engaged to be married, and he would get me these giant buckets of egg whites. And remember, nobody knew about egg whites. There was no South Beach diet. There was no zone diet. You couldn't get them on a menu if I requested them. The chef would once in a while come out and say, "You want what?" It didn't happen. Meanwhile, I'm pulling all the shelves out of my refrigerator so I could fit these giant commercial-sized buckets. And one day I looked at my wife and I said, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to market. The only game in town was egg beaters. And so that came the branding. How do you sell something? And if you look at the time, it was 1992. Whole Foods Markets was starting to get a little traction. People were starting to eat a little healthy. It was post-yuppie. So you had this upwardly mobile. People were looking for brands. They were looking for all natural. That was coming. And so I'm thinking, how can I market this? Everything in the egg case was $2 and $3. And it was in these rosy hues of reds, oranges, and yellows. Those were the happy colors, right? And I thought, well, I'm going to market it to these people who understand health, and they want to see it. And egg whites, if you've ever seen them, they look like buffalo snot. They look awful. So I came up with this. And you look at this and you say, this is 64 ounces, a clear container. And there were no clear containers back then. But you could tell people were moving in that direction where they wanted to see the foods they were eating. The only reason I put a blue label, that was by luck, was the inside was yellow, as you can see in the picture. So the only thing that showed up was blue. And yet, that's what launched my product. Because when people walked by that egg case, it showed up. Everything else were the rosy hues, like I said. And at the time, I mean, I started on a shoestring. I took my wife's hair blower to do the tamper-proof top. And I would go down to my friend's father's factory at 3 in the morning when they opened in Vernon. And the reason I had to use this large container was they supplied tanker trucks. They supplied bakeries and Kraft and Entenmann's with yolks and whites. And when Cheesecake Factory is making bread or whatever the crust, they're not cracking eggs or separating. They're buying them by giant tanks. Well, they only had really like a fire hose that would do it. This was the only size that they would fit in. So some of this was happenstance. The other was I knew I wouldn't be able to get into stores right away. There was a catch-22. And the catch-22 was distributors wouldn't carry you unless stores wanted you, and stores wouldn't carry you unless you had a distributor. So that's where I figured it out. And some was luck and some was good. But there was only one group of people that knew about egg whites. That's them. Bodybuilders. Bodybuilders study nutrition like no other. They know everything down to cost per protein per ounce, or per gram for that matter. So what we started doing, and I see, there it goes, I was a one-person operation. It's really good that just happened, because that's the mentality of the way you've got to do as a one person, is to make yourself seem bigger. And I had my job in advertising, and my wife, she went out one day. These came in a case of 6. Each one of these sold for $16.95. Remember, everything in the dairy case was $2 and $3. $16.95 for 80 egg whites. And she went to a few gyms, and the first day she sold a couple cases. The next day she sold a couple more. 3 weeks later, I quit my job. I said, I'm going to go into the egg business, and my parents looked at me like I was nuts. And the thing was, we could sell it locally, but how do you sell it? How do you sell it to other people? Because stores weren't going to carry it. And because, again, a little bit of luck, that square bottle, I could fit 4 of them in a box that was lined with 2-inch foam. Before I shipped it out, I would take the temperature down to near freezing, so it was slushy, send it 2-day FedEx, and it could arrive in Palm Springs or in New York in the summertime, and it would be fine. It would still be of temperature. So then it came a little bit more exciting. So I knew public relations, so I started sending out press releases. Pretty quick. I mean, obviously, if you look at the bodybuilding ones, those were the first to come alive. But you could see, then it kind of gravitated over to the cooking sector, because there are 2 items, baked Alaska and meringue, that don't fully cook an egg white. Mine were pure liquid egg whites that were tested for salmonella. Bodybuilders could drink them safely raw, but chefs also could use them. And they were so fresh, they weren't used to getting this fresh. These would last for 4 months. 4 months in the refrigerator. So you can see that really, the Washington Post even did it, and Hospitality News, we started selling to the Plaza Hotel in New York. And that was, from a marketing standpoint, these little nuggets you use to parlay the next thing. So of course I would then call the Four Seasons Hotel and guess what? The Plaza Hotel's carrying our product, why aren't you? And that's when you do it. So you got to remember, again, it was an interesting time, because back then there were 83 companies that separated eggs, like my buddy's father's. And let's go to the next one here. So then we started doing paid advertising. The first one was this guy right here. This was in movie theaters. Remember when you sat in a theater and the ads came up, and there was no sound to them back then. And think about who we were marketing to. What is the essence of what I'm selling here? Egg whites. Nobody knew even the value of egg whites or the benefit of egg whites. Certain people knew, though, they didn't want to sit there and crack eggs. So that was really it. And by then we had Bristol Farms, Gelson's, and Whole Foods, and a couple others. We sponsored the 8-time Mr. Olympia, obviously Truck. We started doing Howard Stern. And the one thing I didn't get to is, and I keep pointing to you because you were talking about branding. When you brand something, you really need to, it's like writing a script. And if you write a script, every character you have to do a bio on. You have to know everything about each person, how they would act in a certain scenario, for that matter. So when we were doing bodybuilding shows, I mean, that kind of humor, eat me raw because you can, on a tattoo for their muscle, played well. Didn't use that for hospitality, obviously, but you really, everything about the company was goofy because eggs are goofy, let's face it. I was the chief executive. I had sales executives. We had the COO was the coop operating officer. The accounting was egg accounting. Every month we had a most excellent employee of the month. And we played into that with all the, literally I'd go through the dictionary, anything that started with EX, I would change to egg. If someone called, oh, excuse me, we're having an egg emergency. I can go on and on. At our trade show, we joked that it was Dwight Yoakam that was going to play at our trade show. So there was this brand developed, but it was painstakingly done. It was carefully done on that. So so at some point, we started gaining a little traction. And you can see this is for a grocery store. This is the most coveted space in a grocery store. It's the smallest, and it's refrigerated. That makes it the most coveted. Here we are at Whole Foods owning the whole top. You can see that here. And Gelson's put us on an end cap that was huge. And down here, we're down in what's called the well. But there was a really high visibility. And yet, remember, there were 83 egg companies, and none of them were challenging me at that point. I had this all to myself. And we were shipping like crazy. So then it happened. A lot of things, this didn't all happen at once, but it started out, I would say, down here. Like I said, the Plaza Hotel and Whole Foods. We eventually got into Costco with a product that is this product right here. And this, I invented and patented it. And it's a little cup with 4 egg whites, and you throw it in the microwave, and the lid pops up, and it scrambles up like a cupcake. Didn't do very well, because people didn't understand it. And that's one of the things as an entrepreneur, you get some confidence, you get a little cocky, you forget the essence of, you have to tell the story. It's cute. Would you know what it is? It's called Eggology on the go. And it also received a lot of press. But it did okay. It went into Costco, it did okay. But it wasn't not a trailblazer. And this came out, everything comes out of need. Whether it's the wall urinal that keeps me up at night. This was because my office didn't have a stove or an oven. I only had a microwave, and I wanted to eat egg whites, hence the company. And so I would take egg whites and pour them in a Ziploc bag, drape it so it's the corner of the bag, and then put it in a coffee cup. The reason for the coffee cup is if you put it in a microwave, it would just come out like a pancake. And then the coffee cup gave it shape like a baseball. And that was my snack. Everything comes out of that. So on Good Morning America, we were one of the top 10 new products. Oprah had she used to have a chef, Carrie Neff, on there all the time, who was on there with our product. My favorite is Hilary Swank from $1 Million Baby came out, and I didn't know this was going to happen. We didn't plan for it. But when she came out, she talked about her training, and they came out with a tray of egg whites with my bottle on it, facing the camera, thankfully. And he said, what, you drank this raw? And there's the picture of him drinking it raw, and he's looking at it and goes, oh, Eggology. It doesn't get a whole lot better than that. When The Biggest Loser opened the refrigerator, again, I didn't plan for it. It just happened. Same with the Osbournes. This came later, and this came through a contact that my wife had, and Modern Marvels did an episode on eggs, and they featured us in a segment, which was tremendous. And you can go down here, and you can get also a glimpse of the cutesiness of it. At trade shows were, the biggest trade shows coming up for natural foods. It's called Expo West in Anaheim. And they were all so mundane. You know it. I see you shaking your head. So I started with an egg costume and had someone running around in an egg. The following year, there were there was broccoli running around. Everybody copied it. It was a great idea. But they would be in the aisle as people would walk and try and divert them into our booth. And it was goofy. Everyone wanted to take a picture, including Good Morning San Francisco. So the egg, and then it got to the point where on trade shows we would take pictures of it in front of the White House if we were in DC or wherever it was. But it was a good thing. And then all of a sudden, guess what? South Beach Diet comes out. Barry Sears of The Zone, we're shipping him now direct to his house. And Google Corporate is using it for their craft services and their thing. And then we expanded a little bit. This is what it looked like when it scrambles up. One thing you can't see, these are pretty old pictures, so I apologize for their fuzziness, but we started competing with our supplier, my friend's father's company. We had a brand, why wouldn't you? So we started extending. We were the first to do cage-free and then organic, and then we did hard-boiled eggs, and then came out with several industrial sizes as well as ice cream. Now, most people don't know that ice cream has yolks in it. You wouldn't taste it. Who knew it had yolks? Anyone? Ice cream has yolks. And so I figured if I replace the yolks with whites, it'll make it high protein, get rid of some of the fat, boom. I didn't realize I was competing with Dryers, Ben & Jerry's, and that has limited space too. Great products that was called Cool Cravings, and it had sexy names. It was really good. There's winners and there's not so winners. We were the first to come out with hard-boiled eggs for grab and go, and even a dog food. Those were our dogs at the time. Norton's Naturals, which was becoming hot with raw product. Raw meat is still hot today. No pun. It's frozen. But so that is kind of the trajectory of Eggology. But what was interesting is in 2002, a big company out of the East Coast called Michael's Foods came out with a product called All Whites. You've probably seen it in a green carton. And I remember looking at my wife and saying, "That's it. We're done. We're done. We're just a little company, a little mom and pop." All it did was increase our business. And I hear this often. I hear this from any investor says, "Well, do you have a patent? Do you, what competitive advantages do you have?" Truth is, competition is great, especially on a new industry or something that people don't know about. It widens the pie. It brought awareness to the category that I was in. And when people saw our packaging, look, you either love it or you hate it. But it was all natural. And our packaging now, then they came out, the all whites package came out. If you remember, cartons suddenly had a little spout on them, right? And it became real easy to pour. Well, egg whites are like a glue. And look at the threads on this baby. It's big, it's hard to open. So what do you do? How do you keep your customer? How do you keep your name in front of your customer? You come out with these rubber jar openers. I mean, and that's really what it is here. Being an entrepreneur is navigating a mindset of problems and solutions. And along the way, things keep you up at night, and I know that, think of what I had. I had a USDA factory where there's an inspector there all day, every day. Bird flu, the largest egg recall in history of 500 million eggs that had nothing to do with my product, but all the grocery stores pulled every egg off the shelf for 6 weeks because there was such a consumer scare. So that was, it was an interesting mindset that it goes to. So I sold the company the first time in 2010, and then took it back and then sold it again in 2015. And then a friend of mine who was a main investor in a product called me up and said, "I got something right up your alley." And who knows what CBD is? Anybody? CBD, think about this for a second. In the late 90s, the US military was worried about our soldiers in the Middle East with nerve gas. And they had heard about something called CBD, which is short for cannabidiol, as a brain protectorant. They hired 2 scientists to lead the research. In 2003, the Department of Health and Human Services patents something called CBD. It's a brain protectorant for stroke, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's. They list things associated with HIV, even migraine headaches they list in the patent. This is our government patenting this. Now, just take a step back. Medical marijuana has been, the way I understood it was somebody was going through chemo and lost their appetite. They would smoke marijuana, they would get the munchies, and it would help with their appetite. And that's not it. It's the CBD. That's the medicinal part of that plant. CBD, and you're hearing about it a lot more now than you used to. Some people know about it and some people don't. Some of it comes from the marijuana plant, which is the female. Some of it comes from the hemp plant. This comes from the hemp plant. The hemp plant has very little THC. Ours has 0 THC, 0. We sell this to pro athletes, Olympic athletes. There is 0 drug in this product. It has nanotechnology and it's timed release. And it's really an interesting space. And I'm talking to you at an interesting time because on March 12th, we are about to do a major media launch. So hopefully you'll be hearing about this. But it took 7 months until we were acquired by a publicly held company, which was our supplier, which is named Isodial. And there's 100 companies like ours out there. But they're all playing to, again, know your audience. They're all playing to pot dispensaries. If you look at their packaging, there's marijuana leaves, and it looks like it was made in someone's garage, to be quite honest with you. This is FDA OTC compliant. It has the drug facts on the back. And the main thing is it works. It really works. I mean, I'll just go through it real quick. This is a product, a cream that you put on for muscle and joint aches. This is for the mind. It actually works really well. They sell it at Camp Pendleton, just so you know. I mean, they do it for PTSD and for OCD, and that's very powerful. That's our oral spray. You've heard about this category. It is a huge, Sanjay Gupta was on 60 Minutes back in 2013 calling it the next medical miracle, this category. But think about it. This was patented by the US in 2003 and nobody knew about it. And here we are talking tonight and so few of you know about it. So I didn't know about it until I got involved in this. I'm not a pothead. This has no psychoactive anything in it. And there are other products like this as well. But it's a very interesting space. Just to take it a step forward with you, if you're going to do it, you have to know who your audience is. This audience, we did an exhaustive brand evaluation. It's a 40-plus crowd. It's people who deal with pain. That's who it is. It's not the millennials. And you need to play chess, and you need to figure out the next steps. What's going to happen if you do this? How do you market it like this? So that's really where we're at right now. Just to give you a little heads up also, I have a new mass market, a groundbreaking idea that I'm just looking for investors now that I'm just starting to. But, what keeps me up at night, you kind of know. But what keeps me going during the day? I was thinking about Domino's Pizza today. Back in the 80s, they answered a problem. We couldn't get pizza. It took 2 hours to get a pizza if you wanted it delivered. They did it quick. Where's Domino's today? They're still everywhere, but everybody's encroached on them. And if you look at Apple, my phone, Apple was such a beloved brand. Is there anybody who doesn't love Apple? But the last couple iterations of their products, I don't want to say they've lessened it for me, my perception. It's the competitors have caught up and they just haven't been really innovative. And even just to bring it to a local, Vintage Grocers right down the street, they're trying to make, how many have been in Vintage Grocers? A lot of you. They're trying to make headway. But the problem they have is that people shop at Gelson's and people shop at Sprouts and people don't change their habits. And so I was talking to the marketing person. I said, what's the problem? People, well, that should be their slogan. Change your habit and tie it into Earth Day and make it and you can, it seems, if you peel the onion, it's just a mindset is all it really is. There are two things also that I think about. One is, just the other day I was filling my car up with gas and I thought, how is it a jet fighter can slow to 350 miles an hour and get refueled in air, and we still have to pull up to a gas station, get out, open up the thing, put the thing in, and pay for it? How is it there's no uniformity with a sensor that can automatically do that when the door is open, and you use an app while you're sitting in the car and pay for it? You want ideas? I mean, they're everywhere, like Mike said. I think that was it. One more idea. I have written down here, which is Malibu. The city of Malibu is about to, it looks like they're going to pass an ordinance against straws and single-serve plastic utensils. Straws. And I was talking to somebody about it, and paper straws don't work very well. And Joy, the restaurant over here, Joy, started using metal straws, reusable metal. Talk about a vacuum. There's so many areas where you just have to look around that can be taken advantage of. The key is the branding. Building the story and knowing who you're really talking to. So with that, I'd like to thank Greg and Mike and CLU and this wonderful place called Hub 101 here in beautiful Westlake Village, and thank you all. Wait, before you do, I have samples of these products. It's a bonus day.
We've got the one microphone, so let's see if we can get back.
Just a basic question. If you have egg whites, why is it yellow inside?
A fresh egg white is yellow. It is? Yes, it is. I know my eggs. Trust me, I never thought I'd be in that business, ever.
Just shout out your question.
Yeah. Oh, I left out the best part of the story. Best part of the story. On the ad you received, it talked about being cunning. Right? Does everybody remember that word if you read it? Cunning. I like to think of it as crafty. So I had that catch-22. Distributors wouldn't take it unless stores have it, stores wouldn't have it. So I started calling up the stores. And then I had my wife call up the stores. And we'd say, hi, do you carry Eggology to the dairy manager? And do it 2 or 3 times, and then on the 4th time, I'd call up, and change your voice each time, and say, hi, I'm from Eggology, have you heard of us? And then once we got the public relations, hi, I saw Eggology in Self magazine. Do you carry it? Call up a couple days. And that's how you wag the dog and not the tail. So I'm so glad you asked that. That's a great part of this.
On production, do you have to use HPP or high pressure pasteurization for the eggs for shelf life, or are they refrigerated and maintain it through that?
They're refrigerated. They're
Okay.
refrigerated. They'll actually go longer than 4 months. They, of course, every egg outside the shell has to be pasteurized. That's USDA. And just to give you an idea of USDA versus FDA, USDA, we had an inspector on site every day. If he got stuck in traffic, we couldn't start production. So if you're like me and grew up hearing about Dodger games, Farmer John, this USDA inspecting, you go yada yada, it's a big deal. If I have any hair loss, it's from that USDA inspector.
We have another question over here.
You mentioned in 2003 that the FDA approved your Be Trū. Now, with the pharmaceutical companies getting in the way, I'm sure you're kind of shaking their boots a little bit with a product that isn't nearly as addictive as pharmaceutical pills. Have you come across any backlash or any issues with that?
Let me clarify. 2003 is when the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services patent went through for that category. Ours, we're selling phytocannabinoids. Now, most of you don't know this and how it works. And the reason this worked for me is egg whites, if you cut open your arm muscle, not suggest you do, and you took a microscope to it, the same proteins in your muscle are the exact match of an egg white. That's the reason they incubate the flu vaccine that doesn't work very well in egg whites. So that is the only place on earth you can get the exact match to our human proteins. What CBD is the exact match of what our brain produces to naturally deal with 4 things. Appetite doesn't make you hungry. It doesn't make you not hungry. It makes your body supposed to regulate itself, homeostasis. It deals with pain, mood, which is stress and anxiety, and sleep rhythms. That's the exact match. And that same product, CBD, can be found in chocolate, hops, coffee. It's just not in abundance in those items. In the cannabis plant, it's very, very dense and easy to extract, or easier, I should say. That's why it works. Do you know, I love that because people that sell, it's a great example, and let me give you this. The American Egg Board is in the business of selling eggs. They get their funding from all the farmers, right? So they don't care, they don't want to sell egg whites, that's only half the egg. So they're in the business of constantly spending money for research that shows, guess what, the egg's not so bad. No matter how you slice it, the yolk has the trans fats, the fat, and the cholesterol. And that's just the truth of it. What you just said is it depends who's selling it. There has been research, and very clear research. The same scientist who delivered that research that the military did to NATO is doing a 4-year study using our product. He was out here at the Four Seasons Hotel in May and delivered the preliminary results that the pharmaceutical companies have made it so I can't tell you. The reason is because it is considered a supplement, not a drug. And if it's a supplement, until the research is published, we can't share it. But it was crazy astounding. The amount of brain cells that would die in a normal anything, whether you had a cocktail or a migraine headache, or a hurricane, which would be a seizure, right? Those things all kill brain cells. He proved something that was outrageous, and yet I can't share that because we're live streaming. It's great that you say that. The yolks get used, the yolks are in mass. And when I got into egg whites, they couldn't give them away. There was no use for them. It wasn't, maybe a little bit for baked Alaska. When Entenmann's came out with their fat-free products, they used egg whites instead of yolks, right, or whole egg. So there became a little bit of demand then. The shells get ground up into dog and cat food as calcium. The yolks get used in the things that use the most, salad dressings, mayonnaise, and ice cream. Last year was the first year in history there was more demand for whites than yolks.
We're live streaming, so
So for the Be Trū Organics, is this something that you're looking to just do e-commerce, or are you looking to get this on retail shelves?
Oh, it is on retail shelves. You can buy it at Gold's Gym, Crunch Gym. You can buy it, like I said, at Camp Pendleton, not that you'd go there. The Four Seasons Hotel sells it. The West, just locally, Vintage Market carries it. I mean, we're in Aikens markets, Erewhon markets. I mean, we're only 7, 8 months old. And the reason is, this is really the gold standard. If you look at the way these products, this category, and that's why they kind of have, I don't want to say it has a bad name, but it has a stigma. I mean, it's, excuse me, but it's CVS packaging. It's Bed Bath & Beyond packaging. That was by design. If you flip it over, you see the drug facts because it's FDA. And the main thing, we offer a money-back guarantee. It works. It simply works. And you get to try it.
A question about go back to the egg business. It seemed like you had a ton of different, took one idea and branched out into a bunch of different products, like the boiled eggs, the dog food. Can you talk a little bit about your product ideation process and how you kind of came up with those ideas?
All of it, that's the greatest part. All out of need. If your eyes are open and you see what's going on in the marketplace, and to be an entrepreneur, you really have to have your finger on the pulse of what's happening. It's not just about branding, because branding is a 360 environment. You have to know where things are going. If you're marketing right now on social media, and you're doing a big ad spend, look down the line a little bit. If you see what's going on in the news with the Russians advertising on social media and the bots that are going out all over the place, go back a few months when the whole fake news thing came out. Circulation of newspapers started to dip down. People were stopped. It works. That whole fake news thing made people stop buying papers. Okay, that's now raised. But the social media, in my opinion, it's always going to be here. And it's always going to be effective for certain groups. But we're about to experience some sabotaging of that brand. If you look at it, if you say something loud enough and long enough, people believe it.
more questions? Going once, going twice? We have continuing microphone problems. How about I just use my outside voice?
There you go.